In this tutorial, I will recreate this cool AI scene that Iman used in one of his latest videos. Once you learn the following procedure, you'll be able to make any AI image come to life. All the assets will be down in the description. Let's get to work. Okay, so before we actually start generating any images, there's actually a few ways we can generate them from. One of the options is Adobe Firefly. I personally don't have any experience with it, so I don't use it. Next one is Midjourney. You can access it through Discord. You can write it a prompt right here, and once your image is generated, you're gonna have a lot of these options right here that you can play with. And another option would be using ChatGPT. Personally, this is my favorite way of generating AI images, and whenever I do, I use ChatGPT. Again, you can use any methods I mentioned earlier, but I'm kind of used to working with ChatGPT, so I'm gonna stick to that. Now, the first thing we have to do to actually generate the AI image is to write a prompt. So I wrote ChatGPT a prompt to generate me an image of a dedicated teenage guy working on his computer in his room, and this is what I ended up with. It's not exactly what I want, but I'm gonna play around with it until I get a desired image. And once we're happy with how the image looks, now we can import it in Photoshop. You can import the image by just dragging it right here, and now the only problem with the image is that the guy is facing the wrong direction. We're gonna easily fix that by going to Image, Image Rotation, Flip Canvas Horizontal. Once that is done, you're gonna click on this lock icon right here, and you're gonna press right click and duplicate layer. Now name the duplicated layer foreground and name the first layer to background. Now you're probably asking yourself why we're doing this at all. It's because we're trying to separate the guy from the background. If you want to make any AI image come to life, you're gonna have to separate it into foreground and background elements. Now in this specific example, we are only going to separate the guy from the rest of the image. And the reason for that is because in this example, only the guy's head is gonna be moving. So that is the reason why we necessarily don't have to separate the desk and the chair and the guy from the background, because we're not trying to achieve any depth camera movements. We are just trying to animate the guy like it is in Iman's video. If you for any reason wanted to create those depth camera movements, you'd clearly have to separate this desk, the guy, and the chair from its background. That way you're given depth to the image, and it allows you to make more complex camera movements. Since we're not trying to achieve that, we're only gonna separate the guy from the rest. Now make sure the foreground layer is selected, and then click on Object Selection tool right here. Now just click on the guy, and you're going to have a clear selection around him, as you can see. And now click on this layer mask icon right here. Now you're gonna hold Control or Command on your keyboard, and you're gonna select this layer mask right here. That way we're gonna see the selection around the guy once again. Now we can click on the background layer right here, and now go to Select, Modify, and Expand. And now we're gonna expand the selection by another 10 or 15 pixels, and now click on this generative fill right here. Click Generate. And now once it has finished generating, we're gonna hide this foreground layer to see how it looks. Now all of these images don't really fit in that well, but since we're not actually gonna be moving the guy, you can see that it actually looks good. So once we're happy with how it looks, we can now select these two by holding Shift, right click, and merge layers. Now rename this to background once again, and as you can see now we have clearly separated the guy from its background. And now go to File, Save As, and now you can save it on your computer. Once we're done with Photoshop, now we can open After Effects and create a new composition. We can rename it to Main Comp and leave the rest of the settings as they are. Now click OK. Now we can import our PSD file. Make sure the import kind is set to retain layer sizes and layer options is set to editable layer styles, and then click OK. Now you can open this composition, copy these two with Ctrl+C and paste them into our main composition. And now we can close this one. As you can see, the frame is not fit properly. We have these black bars, but we're gonna fix that in a second. Now select the background layer, right click, transform, fit to comp. And now you can just position your foreground layer as it was before. Once that's all prepared, now we can start to work. First thing I would like to change about this picture is actually its color. I think it's a bit way too bright, and I would like to adjust the color to a bit more purplish instead of this pink right here. To do that, we're gonna press right click, New Adjustment Layer. Now we can search for the effect called Tint and drag it onto our layer. Now we're gonna map this white color to something more purplish. And once we've set up the colors, now we can actually blend the image with the original one. If you're not exactly happy with how the image looks right now, for example the saturation saturation, the brightness, you can always adjust it later on, so don't worry. The next thing we're gonna focus on is animating the guy. We're gonna do that by clicking on the puppet tool right here. Make sure the guy is selected. And now we're gonna place puppet pins all around his body. And now once we're done placing the pins, as we're moving the stop pin right here, the rest of the pins are gonna ensure that the body remains still. So now click on the guy and press U to see all the active keyframes. And now as we click on the stop pin right here, we can see that it's actually labeled as pin 10 down there. So we're gonna take the playhead and move it a bit forward. And now we're just gonna move this stop pin a bit backwards. Now just go a bit forward with the playhead again. And now move it downwards like this. And now we can just copy these two with Control C and paste them over a few more times. Now I'm just gonna make sure these keyframes are a bit closer together. I'm gonna do that by holding Alt or Option on Mac so the spacing between them remains the same. Now I'll just select all of them and press F9 to easy ease them. And now at the end we can even add motion blur to make the movement even smoother. And now the next thing we're gonna do is actually create these little shape layers with the text down here. Now just click on this rectangle tool right here, hold left mouse button and choose rounded rectangle. Now just drag your mouse across the screen until you make a desired shape. Always make sure that the anchor point stays in the middle of the shape. The easiest way to do it is to actually hold Control or Command, go up here and double click on this icon. You're gonna notice that the anchor point has actually snapped from the middle of this screen to the middle of this shape layer. Now just make sure the fill color is set to black and the stroke color is set to white. We could even set the stroke width to something like 1 pixel. And now we're gonna click on the text tool up here. Just click somewhere on your screen and now we can type our text. Make sure you select your text, go down here and search for the font called Helvetica because that's the font Iman uses. We're gonna choose bold right here. Now we're gonna select the type tool once again and click on the screen. Type revenue per month, choose this font right here, and now just turn the caps off. Now just scale it down and place it right here. After that, we can actually make sure our shape layer is a bit more round. We can do it by clicking on it and just changing the roundness value right here. Now we can animate our shape layer so it opens up. We're just gonna hide the text for now. And now to animate this shape, we can just press S for scale on our keyboard, and that's gonna open up this menu right here. And now the one way to animate it is to actually click on this unlinked proportions button, but once we scale this value down, you're gonna see that the shape layer gets kind of distorted, and we don't want that. So we're not gonna use this option to animate it, there's actually another way. Now click on this arrow right here, open Contents, Rectangle, and choose Rectangle Path right here. We're gonna use this size option right here to keyframe our shape layer, because once we change the size here, we can actually see that the shape doesn't get distorted, unlike the scale option we tried earlier. Now just make sure that you have unlinked these proportions right here, and now we can go a bit further with the playhead, set a keyframe for size, go back and drag this value all the way down. Now select the keyframes and hit F9 to easy ease them, and you can turn the motion blur on too. Now we're gonna select them once again and get into the graph editor, select the graph and tweak it up a bit. With this type of curve, we're making sure that the movement actually starts very fast and then gradually slows down. Now we're gonna start animating the text, so we're gonna turn it back on, go down here and search for the effect called Decoder Fade In. Now drag it onto both of our text layers, select them and press U to see all the active keyframes, and now just drag the end keyframes a bit closer together. And now to actually animate the text flying in, we're gonna hit this arrow right here, click on animate and then choose position. Now we're gonna set this second position value to approximately -40, open range selector, and now we just have to animate the offset value from -100 to 100. So go back into the timeline, set the offset keyframe right here, turn it all the way down to -100. Now go forward in the timeline and now keyframe the offset value to 100. And what that's gonna do is actually animate the text flying in from above, all the way from the value of -40 back to 0. The only thing left to do is to actually go into the advanced option right here, make sure the shape is set from square to ramp up, and make sure the movement is based on words instead of characters. That way you're gonna make each word appear separately. Now we just have to repeat the same process for this text up here. But now just instead of keyframing the offset, we're just gonna keyframe the position values right here. And that is because we don't want each letter to appear separately. We want the whole value to drop in at once. So we're gonna set a position value to approximately -20. You can test it out yourself. Set a keyframe, go forward, and put it back to 0. Now the only thing left to do for this animation would actually be to select the shape layer and these two texts. Right click, pre-compose, and you can name this for example shape 1. Now click on this shape and press T for opacity. Go a bit further with the playhead, set the keyframe, go back and set it to 0. You can easy ease the keyframes, and now the shape fades in smoothly instead of appearing harshly. And now for the rest of the shape layers, we don't have to do it manually again. We can just copy this one and paste it over. The one important thing to note here is that you must not duplicate it right here, because now if you decide to make changes in this shape, it's also going to change on the first one, and we don't want that. So make sure you press Ctrl D to duplicate it right here, and now drag this one down to the timeline. And now when you decided to make changes in the second one, it's not going to interfere with the first one, and that's exactly what we want. And once we're done copying them, we can now align them properly. To do that, press Ctrl R, and now you're going to see these rulers at the top and at the left of your screen. Now you can take the top one and put it in the middle, and also drag the left one and place it in the middle as well. That way you're going to be able to align this middle layer to the exact center of your screen. You can also turn the proportional grid on by clicking on this icon and selecting proportional grid. That way you can align it pretty accurately to the middle of the screen. And once you've aligned them, you can now turn the proportional grid off, and you can just slide these rulers back to their place. Now make sure these layers are set to 3D. That's because we're gonna have to rotate the first and the last layer at a specific angle. So select the first and the last layer by holding Ctrl or Command, press R for rotation. Just make sure that the anchor point is actually set in the middle of this layer, because we're gonna have to rotate it based on the anchor point. As you can see, if we decided to rotate it and the anchor point wasn't placed properly, it just wouldn't work. So set the Y rotation of the first shape to approximately -10 degrees and the Z rotation to +2 degrees. Perhaps even set it to 1 degree. And now for the third shape, basically do the same, but instead of -10, you're gonna make the Y rotation a +10. And the same applies to the Z rotation. Once we're done with creating the shapes, now we can start creating those dashed lines. To create these dashed lines, we just have to click on this pen tool right here. Now click on the screen, now go down and click again, but don't let go of your left mouse button. Now you can drag it across the screen, and you can let go of your mouse when you're happy with the position and the shape. Now I'm sure you're a bit confused to why it looks like this, but we just have to turn the fill option off. And now we just have to crank up the stroke value. I'm gonna leave it at the value of 7. And to actually add dashes to this line, we just have to go down there and hit this arrow, open contents, shape, stroke, and now hit this plus icon next to the dashes right here. Now you can play around with the dash values, and once you're happy with how it looks, now you can open up the taper option. You can now set the start length and the end length to 10%, and that's gonna make them more narrow at the ends. The only thing left to do now is to actually animate the dashes. We're gonna do that by going to add here and choosing trim paths, open up trim paths menu, and keyframe the end position from 0 to 100. Now select the keyframes and easy ease them, and now we can go back to the dashes menu and keyframe the offset value from 0, go all the way through the animation, and set the offset value to approximately -250. And now we can apply the effect called Deep Glow. Just drag it onto your shape layer, play around with the radius and exposure settings a bit, and once you're happy with how it looks, now you can start creating the other ones. Just a quick mention that Deep Glow is a paid plugin. In case you don't have it, a good alternative is a plugin called Glow. It's completely free and you can just drag and drop it onto your shape and play around with its settings here until you're happy with the result. Once you're done making the other two dashed lines, now we can create this little shadow behind these shape layers. To do that, we're gonna add a new solid, make sure it's fully black, and hit OK. Now zoom out a bit, choose the rectangle tool, make sure the black solid is selected, and then drag your line like this. Now place the black solid under our shape layers, and now we're gonna press F for mask feather, and you can crank it up to about 500. Now select the black solid once again and press T for opacity, and we can lower it down to about 85%. Maybe even a bit lower to about 70 to 75%. And now as you can see, we have kind of created this shadow behind everything, so it makes everything pop a little bit more. Now go a bit further and set a keyframe for the opacity, and now go to the beginning and set it back to 0. Now select the keyframes and hit F9 to easy ease them. And once we're done with that, now we're gonna add this rotating gears icon that pops up here. To do that, we're firstly gonna have to import the gear icon, so just drag and drop it right here. Don't worry, I'll leave the icon down in the description. Now just take the icon and place it right under the black solid right here. As you can see, the icon is now fully black, but we're gonna fix that in a second. I'll just go down to the effects and presets tab and search for the effect called holographic. Now it is a user preset, so it's not gonna be automatically inside After Effects, but don't worry, I'll leave the effect in the description as well. Now you have to just drag and drop it onto the gear icon, and now you can see that the icon kind of has that holographic look. We're just gonna change the color from orange to white, and we're gonna position it right here. Now just go a bit forward with the playhead, select the gear icon and press P for position, keyframe position, go back to the beginning, and move the icon all the way out of the frame. Now select the keyframes and easy ease them with F9. You can also turn on motion blur. Now we're gonna press R for rotation, set the keyframe, go all the way to the end of the animation, and set the rotation value of approximately 100 degrees. And at the end, press T for opacity, and you can set the opacity to about 45%. And now the last thing we have to do is to add a text right here. It has the same animation, so we're just gonna go to shape 1, copy this text over here, go back to our main comp, paste it, and now we're just going to move it up, type in the right text. We're just gonna make it a bit bigger by holding shift. Now make sure to select it and select the font style to bold. Now just make sure that you move the layer under the guy right here, and now you're gonna see that the text actually turned to purple. The reason for that is the adjustment layer right here. Basically every layer that is under the adjustment layer will have the tint effect applied to them, but we don't want it to be applied to this text. So what we're gonna do to fix it is to actually copy this effect right here with Ctrl C, apply it to the guy and the background with Ctrl V, and now just delete the adjustment layer. And now to add a line under the text, we just have to click on the pen tool right here, click here, and then click on the opposite side while holding shift. That is gonna make sure the line stays straight. We're just gonna make the line a bit thinner, set the stroke value to around 5, maybe even 4. I'm just gonna call it line. Now just make sure the line is under the guy right here. And now we're just gonna change the stroke color to something blue. Now go to the effects and presets and type deep glow. Again, if you don't have deep glow, use glow instead. Drag and drop it onto the line. Now hit this arrow right here, go to contents, shape, stroke, and then open taper and set the end length to 100%. That's gonna create this line kind of thinner at the end. And now the last thing left to do is to animate the line. Go up here, you can close this panel, click on add, trim paths. Open up trim paths. Now set both start and end to 50%. Turn the keyframes on, go a bit further in the timeline, and now set start to 100 and end to 0. Select the keyframes, easy ease, and after some final touches, you should end up with a scene looking like this. As I mentioned, all the assets I use will be down in the description. Don't forget to comment and subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.